on the screen, but I'll send it to you. I'll just actually send you a list of this stuff right now.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, definitely feel free to give me the Cliff Notes version. That would be fine. I'm sure as we get more familiar with it, we'll start to look at that documentation. Also, the idea is we're not really going to mess with this much. It's more just to know things break. We don't have to bug you down the line.
Well, for sure, yeah, and that's the goal for me too. So, but like I said also earlier, if you guys do have issues, I'll help out too, because I want to make sure it works good for you.
Appreciate that
too. Okay, I just sent you a zip file with some stuff in it, and most of the stuff that I'll talk about is kind of outlined in the Word document, I think. But if I'm going to present that, it's just a bunch of words on the screen, and it'll just be kind of dumb. But I'll just do a little demo of the thing, going over the Kepware data logger. And so the SQL Server database also kind of like, it's not really Pushapp, but it's Pushapp specific. So our infrastructure for the Pushapp depends on the data being in the database in specific formats, and expect to find certain data in certain tables. So I'll go over that too. And I don't know how familiar you are with like database topology and all that kind of thing, but it's pretty straightforward. So I'll show you some stuff, and you can ask me any questions if you have any. But first, the data logger here. So it also is pretty straightforward. So there's 3 tabs to configure the data logger. On the general tab, this data source properties has all the details for connecting to the database, and I did create the SQL DB connection in here. And essentially, it's just ODBC connection to the local server. And it's a pretty straightforward connection. And then there's a SQL Server user in the database configured, and those credentials are right here. So another thing, and I just set up the password as, the username is solve and the password is password. So not super like highly secure, but if you want to change that password in the database, you can do that, but then you'll also need to update this password in the data logger so this can still connect.
Gotcha.
On the store and forward thing here, this is a feature of the data logger that will enable Kepware to buffer data if it ever can't connect to the database for whatever reason. So typically it doesn't really happen that much, but like one of the times where it might happen is like SQL Server Express has a limitation that any database cannot be larger than 10 gigabytes. So if a database grows to that size, then the inserts to Kepware will fail. Like the inserts from the data logger to the DB will fail. And if that happens, then the data will start getting built up into this store and forward file. That's just a kind of a safeguard, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The batch identifier is a field that you can specify here to like identify each batch that we log. So we use the batch identifier for the batch time, and in the database for the Pushapp, I think that's referred to as the group time. And I'll show you that a little bit more when we get to the database part. On the data map, this is where, so kind of stepping back a bit, like I split up the data loggers just for like organizational purposes. They could all be in one data logger, but then there would be like, I don't know, tens of thousands of rows. And I think it's easier to kind of organize things into separate data loggers. And it seems to, I think functionally it works the same, but just to organize stuff, like especially since these devices are different IPs and they can go offline together. I don't know. I just split it up. More or less, even just to troubleshoot the problems you were having. I was like wanting to make sure I was getting good data from from each data logger or whatever, or each point. However, like if a device does go offline, because I put all the NCUs here in the same data logger, so we have channel 1, 2, and 3. If any one of these goes online, it's still going to log data. It's just going to like have a bad quality tag associated with it. But one thing to note here is, I think I maybe mentioned earlier, is like if any of these tag names change that are being logged in the data logger, like these will cause the whole data logger to not work. So I think you're going to be consistent with the tag names now, but I just thought I'd mention that.
And if we remove tags, that'll also happen, right?
Yeah, if you remove a tag out of this channel and it's a tag that's within the data logger, you'll see here that it'll like have a red exclamation point here, and I think there might also be like an event down in the logger. You just need to remove that tag from the data logger.
Got it. And
then it'll log again. However, if it is a tag that the Pushapp is using to kind of push up, that tag will be, the Pushapp will still create a CSV, but instead of having like a value in there, it'll just be a blank or a null. It won't have like a default value in there.
Right.
If that makes any sense. And sometimes, and I don't know, you may be familiar with this, but if that happens, it's device dependent. But like if there's a missing field in a file that we're pushing to locus, and that's not a optional field or whatever, I think that send will fail. But I can't remember the details on that. If that's actually true or not. But
yeah, that's been the case historically. And just out of curiosity, not that we plan on doing this, but let's say we wanted to add a tag. Is there any effect on the data logger? Because like the tags that it's pulling exist, they're not renamed. Is there any mal effect on the data logger if we just add a tag, like just append it, for example?
No, there's nothing needs to change on the data logger unless it's a tag you want to add to like the push part.
Right. Understood. Okay.
So here's all the list of tags, and there's the screen here. Each tag has the important field here of a numeric ID, which uniquely identifies each device. And there's also this list to be cross-referenced in the database, so you'll see a little bit where the numeric ID is set up in the database too. So if you scroll down to like the second device, it's numeric ID 2, and each TCU also has its own numeric ID. And then this is easily maintained with the CSV import-export. So if you want to make changes to like the whole list, or if you change one of these channel names, it's easy to go into like export the CSV and then open it up in Excel and then do like a copy paste or whatever, manipulate it that way. Instead of just, you'd have to go and double click each of these. It'd be not feasible. And so here's the database table that the data is being logged to. And then this is like a table that we created, or it's part of the database infrastructure. And then the mapped fields here, this is where you match the fields from Kepware to the fields in the database. So batch ID comes from that batch timestamp on the general tab, and then goes into this database field name, and then name. This just cross-references all the fields here. There's a couple other options here. I just kept where different ways you can log data. And I'll show you the data being logged in a little bit. And then triggers. So we've got a conditional trigger set up to log data, and it uses there's a few ways you can set up the data logger, and one of the kind of the most reliable way we've found to do it is to use the condition, and then it has start and a stop condition. So the start condition will be when the value of the system time, the seconds value, is greater than 1. And then we'll log all the data in the group. And then on the stop, it's an arbitrary time of 20. It doesn't take 20 seconds to log the data, but there's also a stop condition in there. And then we were not logging like on a static interval or here. So it's just on that condition, it logs the data every minute. And so like, you might ask why? Well, why don't you log it every 5 minutes? And I think it is possible to do that, but what we need in the database is we need a timestamp for every like 5 minute interval. And if we just click log on static interval here and click 5 and then minutes, we're not going to be guaranteed that that data is going to log like on the 5 minute like data point every 5 minutes. So
right,
we want every minute.
Yep. Yeah, and the aggregations on LocusNock will do a pretty good job of kind of making that smooth and easy to look at. Right.
So, but yeah, and that being said, like the Pushapp is still only sending like the 5 minute data. I'm not sure if your platform.
Okay, got it.
It has. This isn't. We're not talking about the Pushapp yet, but
right. Understood. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. And obviously, if we wanted to have 1 minute data being uploaded right now, like you're saying, you probably, just as a general rule of thumb, want to log the data more frequently than the actual log files or push app data.
Yeah.
In theory, just so you're not like, you're not missing a timestamp per se if you miss one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, sort of like, and I don't know, this log on static interval is not time dependent. So like if you started at like 12:00 at noon or whatever,
right? Like
it might log, there might be a slight deviation every 5 minutes, and then eventually it might stray off of the 50. It might be at like 5:01 or whatever that it logs and 5:06.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure, but anyway, that's kind of like more info. Yeah, cool. So I think that's about it for the specifics on the data logger per se. So what else is there anything else here that I mean, these are all set up identically, except the data map is different. So if we go on one of these and kind of look, this has a numeric ID of 216. So they're all unique for each device. So unless you have any questions about the data logger, that's a quick data logger review.
I think that's great. Yep.
Cool. You're also a little bit familiar with Kepler, I think, too, so it's probably pretty easy to figure out. Okay, so now we'll look at the database. So this is kind of like a little bit of a stripped down version of kind of our site historian database. So there's maybe more here than there needs to be, but that's just because our process works pretty good, and I mean I wasn't going to redo the process just for this whole thing to make it like a ton simpler, but it's pretty simple if you're a little bit familiar with database like topology here with tables like views and then stored procedures. So let me see here if I can get notes. So, okay, and we installed SQL Server Express here. It's a free version, and so the two limitations of SQL Server Express are one, each database can be no larger than 10 gigabytes. And that's pretty doable with this case because we don't need to store data long term. So that's no problem. And the other limitation is the SQL Server agent is disabled or not available with SQL Express. So and the agent is just a way to schedule jobs in the database. And we can get around that by just using the Windows Task Scheduler. So, and I'll show you the tasks in a bit. But first, I'll go through the tables here. So the tables, several of these tables are just for configuration of the site. So in the plant config table, it has like the high level plant data, like the name, plant identifier, which this isn't really used by anything, the Pushapp or anything. And this is also kind of a field that was used like in our old platform, and it's not really, doesn't really do anything. If you put any number in there, it wouldn't break anything. This limit DB is something that we've had a process for some of the sites that we use that have SQL Express. We have the Pushapp monitoring for that database limit size, and if it gets close to that, then we'll get a warning through our monitoring system. There's nothing like that set up here, but if it should never happen, because there's a job also to trim the database size every night. So I don't see that being an issue unless there's becomes some requirement where you need to store data for longer than like a couple days. And then I wasn't sure actually even where the test site was, but this is just another descriptive identifier of like the time zone.
Got it.
Where is the site?
It's actually I forget, or it's in New Mexico.
Okay.
Yeah. But all the timestamps are in UTC, right? Just as per.
Well, right. Yeah, all the batch timestamps are in UTC, but there are like.
Oh, there's all sorts of metadata for the.
There's a little bit.
Yeah.
Yep. So this is created on. This is just the timestamp of a local timestamp of when the data hit the database.
Yep.
So but it's not really used by the Pushapp. It's just more of like one of the kind of just a good practice with the database. So anyway, the plant config, it also has like the MAC address, which is used for the node ID. The Pushapp does actually grab that field and uses that, and it posts the data to Locus. So there's that table. Next table I'll show here is the device model table. So this has got all the device level information for the DB. And so the make model here is pretty free form. Like this make is game change. However, this model is like this matches a mapping in the Pushapp. So the Pushapp uses that field to look up how to map the CSV file. And then this is used by the Pushapp also when it posts the file to Locus. It uses that mapping class or whatever. It's one of the parameters we post. And then there's a couple other fields here that for configuration of the database and data organization. So this is where the data is logged. Every 1 minute, there's data that hits here. And then as part of like the data organization process, there's a job that runs every 5 minutes that archives data, which I think is optional in this case, but I'm still storing the data for 1 minute in that table. Or I'm sorry, the 1 minute data for 3 days, just in case or whatever. I guess it's not really necessary, but 3 days is not that much. And if something ever happened, you need to like grab data from a couple days ago. That's there for you. And then the archive table name is right here. So in the archive database, those tables are right here. And there's a couple of others. These fields are just kind of for long-term storage, which is not necessary here. And I didn't like trim everything out because I didn't want to like have to redo a lot of our infrastructure to build this process. So it's just there. Won't be used by you guys. The next table, the device table, and I don't know if you opened that Word document I sent, but I'm kind of going along with that. So
yep,
if you want to look at that, it might follow along a little bit anyway.
Got it open. It's great. Thank you for putting those together, by the way. Super helpful.
Yeah, no worries. So the devices, or the device table, just goes and lists each device and the numeric ID. So the Pushapp knows, like, you know, when it finds a device model, it knows, okay, I need to look at these numeric IDs so I know how to map that data and send it up to the Pushapp. or send it up to the cloud. Next table is job config SRE, which is a little bit redundant, but it's not redundant, I guess, because the Pushapp uses this table to keep track of how far it's processed data. So this last processed ID is like that's how far the Pushapp has read data and sent it to Locus. So, and then if you want to shut off, like, this is a little bit confusing, and it's kind of one of the quirky things with the Pushapp, because when we developed the Pushapp, we were kind of in a hurry, and there's some things that are like strict. So these table names have to be like, they're very like strict. And I split up the NCUs and the trackers. Well, I'm sorry, the NCUs and the TCUs into two different like table archives, right. and I had to name them here with a prefix of DNP3, because that's just how the Pushapp was developed. And it's kind of like a quirky thing, but
no worries, totally understand.
Yeah, cool. So I believe the NCUs are in the DNP3 station, and the TCUs are in the trackers set. And you could edit this field. It's a binary 0 or 1 to turn off if it's false in this field, the Pushapp won't send data for those devices.
Okay.
Probably not something you'll ever need, but it's available. And then control values also has just some site configuration information. So debug mode, if it's 0 or 1 here, it's looking for a 0 or 1. If it's 1, it logs more information in this solve log table, which looks like this. I'll just query this, and so this is kind of the 5-minute process, and like what's going on. Like, so if there's issues, this is one of the first places to look. And if the debug mode is turned on, this logs more data. If it's turned off, then there's not very many rows that pop into this table. Solve log days is how many days worth of data to store in the solve log, and last reorg is like just keeps track of the 5-minute job that runs this database reorg, and then the backup path for the nightly backup of the database. And so the scheduled task that runs this reorg looks at this, and if the day changes from one day to the next, then it does like some purging of data, and it also does the database backup, which may or may not come in handy, but I don't think it will. It's just part of the procedure, and it's something, if you want to not happen, it can be shut off as well. But, and so the other tables in here are the DT site table is where the data is logged, and so Kepware logs the data here, and this is kind of just like the raw data. We have the name here that identifies the field, the numeric ID identifies the device, and then this is the value that's coming from the device. And there's a few timestamps here. This is the value from Kepware from the so the value has a timestamp associated with it, and there's also this batch timestamp. So the reason we keep both is because this value timestamp, if the device has good quality data and it just hasn't been pulled within like a couple minutes, this timestamp doesn't always update to like to the right now time. Whereas this batch timestamp is updated. Like, so when we log the data every 5 minutes, we want to have that 5-minute timestamp associated with the data, as long as the data quality is good, and the data quality is represented in that tag right there, the quality tag. So we also looked at the solve log table. So this is kind of like a log of what's going on. And this is what's going on with the database, not necessarily the Pushapp. So just so that's clear. And the other table here, the last table, is this files process SRE, which is a list of all this is how the Pushapp keeps track of the CSV files that it's creating and sending. So each device or each CSV will be in this field, and then this transfer complete is updated when the file gets sent. So we might, I don't know if CSVs are sent. Yeah, so here, there's 3 that haven't been sent yet. And I bet those will send pretty quick, hopefully. Anyway, so we'll look in the CSVs folder just to see what's going on there. Wonder what's going on with those. Well, now there's a lot more, so we'll just take a look at that in a little bit and see if that's changed at all.
Okay.
But anyway. Okay, so then there's tables here, and then so the actual tables or views tables, the actual database objects that the Pushapp reads are these tables here that start with DNP3, and they're not actually tables, they're just views that point to data in other locations. And the reason for them is when we first developed the Pushapp, we had a database infrastructure that was set up very specifically, and we kind of updated our database infrastructure, but we didn't want to completely revamp the Pushapp to handle that. So what we did was we kind of build these views just to make the data be in the exact format that the Pushapp expects it to be in. So this data looks a lot like the data that's being logged in DT site. It actually is that same data. If we look at this view, and if I'm going over your head on database stuff here, I'm sorry, but this is just how it works. So if we look at this view, a view is basically a stored query in a database. So if we look at this view, the definition or whatever of it, we can see that this view here's a query that kind of corresponds to this view. So it's just a query of this DT site table. And then it formats the data how the Pushapp is expecting to see the data.
Gotcha.
It's just kind of a thing that we use to organize data and have it be working with all the infrastructure. So so there's those, and there's these other views. These are also views that kind of that format these fields in the Pushapp way or whatever. These views are very similar to the tables that they query, which are the device models table and the devices table. Hit up these 2 tables right here for the Pushapp. And the device list is just a complete list of all the devices. And I think I sent you a list similar to this for the node ID list.
Yep.
One of the things here that's useful is, so these CSVs that get created every 5 minutes have a file name here, and it starts with a number. And actually, it's going to be pretty okay because this, it seems like it's the numeric ID, but it's actually this device ID. That's the first number in the file name. But I think in this data, it's all identical. So I guess that's not an issue for this. But that this device ID comes from the ID column of this table. And it's an auto-generated number. So if we delete rows and then add more rows, then we have a problem where this number doesn't match this number anymore. And it's created confusion. I'm just letting you know that it's created confusion when we're trying to troubleshoot CSV issues. But I don't think it's going to be an issue with this because, for one, there's only 2 device models, and everything seems to be pretty consistent here. So there's a quick description of the views and the tables. I'm not going to get into these store procedures too much, but what I will talk about is this one right here. This is like the only one that gets executed every 5 minutes, and it's set up as a scheduled task to do that right here. Solve data reorg. It runs it's set up to run every 5 minutes, I believe. Yep, repeat every 5 minutes, and then it just runs this program, runs the SQL command to execute this store procedure. And basically what this store procedure does is it takes data from this table and sticks it in the archive table. This table also prunes the data in here every 5 minutes according to like the last processed ID in this table right here. So this table stays really small. This DT site table stays really small and just makes it work better. Like that's one of the things I had to change, is because when this table was getting really big, like the queries just were taking too long, and then it was just adding up, because the disk isn't super fast. So it works a lot better now that we did that. So when this procedure runs every 5 minutes, I showed those logs for a little bit there. I think they were. I'm going to close some of these windows down. So every 5 minutes, we've got logged in data here. It tells you what it's doing. So we'll look at this 11:03 minute point. So it logged 360 records for device ID 1, which is the NCUs. They go into the station table, and then it logged 57,000 records for the TCUs, basically. And then this is a summary. So it took less than 4 seconds, which is good. And then it also does some deleting here. So it found records that it could delete. So it did that. And it does that, like, it doesn't do it all at once, because then it would, like, if it stopped for a while and then it started again, it would take a long time to delete the records. So it does 50,000 at a time and waits 5 seconds in between, so the database can still, so the computer can still kind of do stuff with the database during that time.
Okay.
And so that's the quick and dirty description of the database.
Yeah, no, that's great. Really appreciate it. I think it gives us a lot of tools too, in the event that things are not working as expected. I mean, there's obviously quite a lot of auditing we can do, which I guess
right,
should be expected. But it's just great you've gone through it all. That's really helpful for us.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we're not gonna like just say, okay, here's the thing, here it works, and then
right.
like good luck, because then we both fail maybe if something goes wrong. So this is the main query to like kind of look at this solve log to get it first. If there is a problem, like there'll probably be an error in here or something that maybe will lead you to the
hey guys,
problem.
Daniel here.
With
Spencer,
the
did you want me to give
and then there's a few other places to look with the
Pushapp
Pushapp troubleshooting. So down in the number 4 section of the Word doc, the Pushapp is a Python app that we wrote to
no, not really. Honestly, what we do is in their documentation
to send data to
there's
Locus,
just kind
basically.
of
And
a
so
map,
that Pushapp is
and
installed
whatever
here
the
in this folder
description of
here.
that is, we just pass through.
And these are all
now, there
the
have been some
files
changes
to run
in
it,
terms
or
of
not
our
to run it, but
remapping recently.
that it
I am
consists
going through
of.
and validating
And
some of that right now.
I
We've
may
basically
add
done
to
a little
this,
bit of a restructure to see
provide
if we
more
can make the
documentation,
communications work a little bit better
but without
and more
going into
consistently.
like the source code.
So Jay,
Like,
before you
it's
kind
pretty
of dive into
straightforward.
any
There's
alerts
2
or
things that
alarms or
it does.
measured
It
values,
makes files and it sends
just
files.
hold off, maybe
So,
until the end of the day.
and it
I
does
should be
this also
sending
on
an
a 5-minute
email out
scheduled
to let you
task. So
guys
that
know that
scheduled
all the
task
data that's coming through makes sense,
is
everything's
set
scaled
up
properly.
right here.
Right now, what we've been
SRE
doing is
Pushapp.
adjusting some things to
Every 5
basically try to
minutes
make
it
the communications
runs,
a little bit
and
more
then
robust.
it does 3
And
things
with that,
actually.
there
It
might
sends
be some
files,
shifts
because
in
if
terms
there's
of
ever
how
a
the data's
problem and
going.
it leaves files in
So
the
for game change,
CSVs
what I would
folder,
say is,
first it sends them
I will
before
let
it
you guys
makes
know
more
when data
files,
should be all good
and then
through and
when
through. And it should be later
after
today
it
or
makes the
tomorrow at the
files,
very
then it
latest.
tries to send them
The
right
data is
away.
coming
So,
through.
and
We are
that's the
capturing it
standard
locally. It's
procedure
just a
there.
matter of tweaking at this point.
And then in the document, I've got some little real simple instructions on how to manually run those. So that's one of the troubleshooting techniques to do if you ever have problems, is to just go here, and if there's problems, we can disable this task, and then we can open up our task scheduler, go in here, and that's how we run it manually.
That makes sense. And obviously what Game Change
straightforward.
might even like is, who knows, we can set up some email notifications
And then
for
it's just
them.
this
I don't know if they're
run.py
continuing to do work
with a
on
couple
site or just
parameters.
general support.
We don't need to do it now, but because
maybe
it's
it'd be
running
great to set
automatically
them
in
up
the
with their own
background.
account, right? That's
Another
really up to
thing
you
I'll
guys in Game
just
Change,
briefly
but,
touch on is these environment
if they're
variables.
Kind of involved enough where they're asking
So the Pushapp uses those environment variables,
TCU
where those are
doing,
found. If you're not
at this time
familiar
of
here,
day,
if you go to computer properties,
it might even be
and then
worth our
advanced
time
system
to
settings,
set them up on the portal.
there's the
That way you
environment
can kind of
variable set up
short-circuit a bit,
here.
especially if there's a lot of back and forth during
And then just
session
scroll down in this list.
So that's something we're happy to do.
There's
and
a
maybe
few.
just make sure the data
They're all
makes sense
set
in
up
Game
right
Change.
here. So the error folder, so that any CSVs that are sent with an error, they get
themselves these days,
pushed back into that folder there, CSV errors folder.
For more
and then environment. So there's you can, if you want to send files to like a different, like a test environment, you could specify that here. And then, so if I'm going to go over this production here, the way that you can set up the, and I think I'll add to this document with this information, but so it's production versus staging.
No worries.
So
we can
the way
definitely,
those URLs are set up in this
sync up on that after all the data looks good in our platform. And if you happen to hear from Game Change that they're interested in getting more access to the data you guys are looking at,
if we look at this file, we can see the URLs. So we have staging push URL and production push URL.
Tomorrow.
If you ever update your
Gallup updates
servers or need to update
alarms that I think
the URL for even for production, this is where you would do that.
Not mapped to the server side yet.
And then
I did find that we're capturing them locally, but they need to be registered on the platform.
Staging,
so there is
and production.
A UPS component now.
The two main ones that we've used in the past are staging and production.
Through, though, until
staging if we need to do any testing or anything.
Those are
and
custom alarms
we're
creating just for the site.
Send files up to
it's not too difficult for us to do, but it's just something
so,
that kind of got lost in the shuffle. We made sure that they're getting
that this URL
locally.
should work, I think, going forward,
just
unless some major changes with your servers.
We do with Game Change when we get alarms is tell our platform what should be displayed when we capture it locally.
And then the push log file
site.
And the push servers. Push
so
server's not really
that in
used.
In terms of the timeline.
We used it for like an error reporting tool, because what we had is we had a bunch of servers with
in
arbitrary
terms of our
server names.
I think that's the only
errors.
thing left on our plate. There were two
we
other
wouldn't know where the
items
errors were coming from because the server
was,
wasn't a descriptive
we're
server
very
name,
interested
so
in giving you guys some training on our real-time HMI. This will give you more real-time visibility.
Okay, so when we're sending
critical
CSVs here, the CSVs go into this
trackers,
folder,
inverters, meters,
and then they get sent. So here you can see them going. They're pretty much always sending.
That's, remotely accessible, real-time. You just log in and
and
you
so
can see it there.
And it's scheduled to run every 5 minutes, but a lot of times
to
send it takes longer than 5 minutes. So there's 2 records in the file for 2 5-minute periods,
which is sometimes helpful for the owners to have, but usually it's not something you guys have to worry about too much.
I briefly mentioned
and then
these
the
errors.
Other thing
there's
telemetry
a
scope
few files in here because I think there was
City of Gallup.
an issue.
So the last
when we were
item,
messing with those
you've
channels,
been
those
pretty
Modbus channels and
it
fields,
sounds like they're kind of gearing up.
these were getting pushed in error. So I don't know if there was something that changed or that caused this. But when you went and fixed the channels, and then I went and fixed the data loggers to match the channels again, then these stopped.
But I think that's just
these errors stopped.
Their plate. The points have been signed off on, and we're all on the same page, I believe.
And then the other useful thing that comes out of the Pushapp is this push from this push log file. It logs data here, so we can look at this file, which is created every day, and then every day it archives to a file name, and it keeps the last like 10 or 11 days worth of data. And so this just a lot of log entries here. If there's bad quality data for an item, it tells us here, because like maybe we look at CSVs getting sent every 5 minutes, and we see them going every 5 minutes, but then we don't see data on the Locust platform. Well, it might be because one of the rows has a bad quality data.
It might be worth poking them just because we don't want to hear 6 months from now.
Because if there's any particular field in a row that's bad quality, then it kind of it red flags the whole row.
Who's kind of driving that can just follow up.
As soon as we get CSVs here, I'll show you.
Just to make sure we're on the same page with them. I don't think you guys need to act as the middleman.
There should be CSVs popping in here any second.
If all the construction-related things are done, we'll just see what's going on there.
But anyway, so this has some
in terms of the HMI training,
information in here, and here's what
interested in. Perhaps once the site is kind of fully up and running for a bit, you guys have gotten PTO at this point, correct?
I'm not sure what caused this error or why, but failure 500. I'm not sure if that's something that's been happening here regularly, or it looks like it's possible that it has been.
Yeah, what we can do is
maybe not, because this is 9.
Yeah, I mean,
28.
What we usually do is there's a manual.
It's the same error
though.
The
folks
but it's not happening
call,
every 5 minutes.
And users, that's not such a big deal, especially if you don't have a use case right now.
Maybe it is.
But we definitely do want to go through at least once. We'll give you guys the manual, and if you guys have questions down the line, you can feel free to reach out. I don't think it's something that you guys have had a requirement about for City of Gallup. We're just happy to show you what we can do, since we are providing this SCADA on
So
site.
One thing we can try here is let's try doing this.
So we'll reach out on that as well.
Do this as an exercise
to see what your general interest is. Maybe we can schedule that next week. Is the overall
to manually run
like full operation right now? Pretty much.
Files.
I did see the site went down for a little bit yesterday or the day before. Is there still some ongoing work? Okay. Okay. And in terms of the inverter issues, are you guys able to get the data that you need to resolve those through the Locust knock, the alarms, and
so here we can see a lot that's coming through with bad quality. Same thing we see in the log records here. If I open one of these,
okay,
this one is a good one, and the way that you can immediately identify that is this second parameter here is like, I think, the error column, and if that's 0, then it's all good. But if it's a 110,
I have a feeling if they weren't, we would hear about it.
I think some of these later TCUs are bad quality.
That's a good sign. All right, just want to be sure we're not missing anything there. So on our side, Game Change, we need to sync up with you and let you know when that's 100%. On the EPS as well, we'll definitely make sure HD is specifically looped in.
Maybe a lot of these have cleared up.
Get released to the platform. And then Ridfitch will reach out on the HMI
here's
training
a bad
to
one.
see if
It
there's
says
interest
bad
in maybe
data,
sending that
so
up next week. And then
that means
probably
even if
more
there are
importantly,
numbers
the
here and
telemetry scope of work
most of the data look good, this would still not show
with
up
the city
in
of
the
Gallup. Does that
monitoring
sound about right?
platform because of that bad quality data. And that's a good,
okay.
All good here.
Yeah, it'd be really great to get
the
that.
The first three
us.
are the NCUs, so
we can try to
this one
push
there
it
must
forward
be some
a bit,
bad
just
quality
kind of remind
data
them
there. I don't know
we're kind of waiting.
which
so
row. Or
that might
it's hard to tell from the
bit,
CSV which data
vocal
point is bad because it doesn't
do that.
have. It only has the quality listed by row and not by field.
Okay.
You'd have to look in the database to see.
Yeah, we're ready to go, basically.
Or
so
Kepware
we haven't really
to
been
find
bugging
the
folks,
data field.
But,
that's not,
it would be really
working
great
right.
if we just kind of put that behind us.
So.
All right. Great.
Now if we send these files, let's see if we can see which one is bad. I don't know. It's weird. It'll take a bit to send them all too, but it could be that it's one of these top three. I'm not sure.
You know,
it's not a super descriptive error message either. This is like
from what it sounded like,
the response
Spencer,
from
like
the
they
web
finally got
post,
the API to work, but the moment
HTTP
that they
post.
did, there was no production from the meters, right? I think
sometimes you can look at
around that time the meters, I think, were even potentially reset. There was something unusual where we never really found out what happened. There's data, historical data, but I think when they tried to pull data for that day, or the past 5 minutes, then they basically got zero values, which just happened to be kind of.
I don't know what the problem is, but usually that's the HTTP return code, and it's not always super obvious what the problem is.
Based on what they were telling me, they got full access or
yeah, no worries. So basically the 5. So here we're going to get the request on the upload response, right? And that could be from our server, or it could be from some sort of intermediary point where if the data is not properly transferred, there will just be sort of a general error code at that point, right?
Yeah.
I think usually if you get an error of 200 from us, it means that it hit our server, but it wasn't accepted for whatever reason. So don't delete the data. And then there's sort of an upload success code. Is that where?
Right.
Is that where we would find it?
So like if it's I don't know what the code is for a success, but that's not really reported in the log anywhere. Like
okay.
In the Pushapp log file, there's no success indicator. It's just if there's a problem with a send, then we see it. We've been seeing it here. It's unfortunate that this doesn't specify which CSV this is trying to send, right? Because it looks like, I don't know if you could maybe see in your system if you're getting the NCU data, but
yeah, actually I could pull it up right now. There's just so many there's so many devices. It might take some time to figure out which ones aren't sending. Yeah. And which ones aren't sending because of local comms issues, or if it's a Pushapp thing. But let me see if I can get something here. At least for the NCU data, right? Like in theory.
That's what yeah.
So for the NCU data, let me see. All right, so for NCU 1, latest data, I will say the 600 individual components does make a platform a little slow, a little slower than I'm used to. It actually does have an effect. It's not not breaking, but it gets hung up a little bit when I'm trying to navigate some stuff. But in terms of the individual NCUs, let's see here. We have the latest timestamp from 2 and 3 is actually today at 2:24 Eastern. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty real time. Now, NCU1 is not coming through for some reason, which is a bit funny. Because I think that one's definitely working locally, so we should be getting some data, right?
Yeah.
That's weird. They're all using the same device class, so they should be all kind of looking the same in terms of the raw log. So a pretty good chance that it's the NCU1 log or CSV that's not coming through, right?
Okay, yeah.
Now, is it possible because you added data? I mean, we can just, as a sanity check, I think the NCU data was working locally, but is that something we can bring up really quick on the Kepler server just to make sure I'm not missing anything? I mean, you have the data there, right?
Yeah.
It's not null.
Yeah, right. So yeah, the whole quick client here is pretty the quickest way to do that.
Mm-hmm. I guess
except
yeah, we pulled data. The data that's really visible is the stow angle. But yeah, it doesn't look. Oh. So we should be getting some data. These numbers are really crazy, by the way. I'm wondering if maybe our system's not so happy about the large numbers it's getting. I mean,
yeah, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm. Let me look into that a little bit more. On the TCU side, I think we should also start to be getting data from these guys. On the TCUs, yeah, it looks like we're getting some pretty good data for all this. So yeah, getting some data from the TCUs on NCU3 now, finally. Getting some data from TCU2. So the data is coming through. I think we have bad quality data, but it's very easy for me to discern, like when it's bad quality, it'll just be null, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think what's happening is for everything except for NCU1, everything's getting pushed through correctly on the server side, but NCU1, I'm guessing the NCU data, that's getting stuck someplace. So the best, is there a way, I mean, it's kind of silly, but we do this on our MocquiSuites all the time. Is there a way to kind of like clear the cache or clear what's in the database and just kind of start fresh? Just in case there was one logged, maybe one logged data point that was just extremely large. The database didn't want to handle it and as such rejected it. Usually what I've told our tech team is in those cases, just say like, we got it. That way that one just kind of goes through and we move on to the next one. But sometimes we actually do find if we clear things and start fresh, even if we lose data, we're good. And 9 times out of 10, as long as the data stream gets brought back up, losing 5 minutes or 10 or even a day's worth of data for one device is not such a big deal. So I'm wondering, is there a fairly easy method to do that? Because sometimes that'll allow us to be able to track it too.
Yeah. So this is where the data comes from.
Yeah.
The Pushapp log that the Pushapp grabs, and there's not a ton of data in this to begin with. But
yeah,
let's just look here and see how many rows are in this table. So the first data was from 11:15, and this is Pacific time. I think it.
Right.
I think right or.
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Okay. So yeah, that data is not old. It's 15 minutes old.
Did you select Central? That wouldn't make sense though.
No. So like I put Central in here because I didn't know where the time was.
I gotcha.
So
Otherwise,
I'm
it's
just
on the
gonna change
computer,
it.
the PC's time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't
Pacific.
adjust the system date time at all.
Got it. Okay. Understood.
But that's where the created comes from, is the system, the local time and the system date time.
Okay, got it. So yeah, that's very recent.
But I can delete this but I don't know, because how this works is the Pushapp does its thing, makes a bunch of CSVs, it updates the field in here, right here, and then every 5 minutes when this database reorg process runs, it deletes everything in this table before this row. So every 5 minutes, like, it's getting pruned, the old data's getting pruned. I could just delete everything and start over I don't think that'll make any difference though. Because of the fact that it is kind of every 5 minutes it's getting new data. And we could see by looking at this, the front part of this table is only 15 minutes old. You know what I mean? Like if this was super old data in here, then maybe we start fresh again, but I don't know.
I don't know what happened there. Yeah,
my hunch,
now,
it's just a guess, is there's something with these.
So you're good. I mean, Mike and Sean should
these numbers in
I'm stuck on another call, but
I
think
can't
you guys
prove
don't
anything
necessarily
right this second.
need me.
Like,
I'll try to dial in if I can.
These big numbers, maybe. I'm not sure if they were happening
I'll remind
before.
Sean and Mike to make
we do
sure
have a couple days worth of data that we could query.
They should know. I think Sean specifically wants to discuss Wildberry.
Whoops.
The Wildberry project. That's our upcoming SCADA job.
I don't know. Click that on accident.
Why don't we dial in and we'll discuss. We'll discuss there. I think there is a dial-in number, that 646 number. I think you were just there, right?
Here's some stow data that looks a lot better than that.
Oh, I'm sorry,
big
Keith.
Numbers.
I was expecting a call from another Keith. I apologize. I thought that Keith
or maybe they were super small numbers.
So
I don't know.
I didn't even see. It was Keith Wagner. I apologize. Keith, could I call you back in like 5 minutes? Would that be okay? I'm just getting off another call and I'll call you in between this call. Okay. All right. Appreciate it. Thank you. Bye.
You know, because this number, if we go to, where was that? Well, I'm not sure what's going on here. Sometimes this quick client doesn't refresh all the time. But if that would cause that error, I'm not sure. I can't really say at this time.
Okay.
But so if we got data that's not going up, the places to look are in that log file here, or do a manual like run at the command prompt.
Got it.
There's a couple of ways to see that.
Okay, well, you know, what I'll do is we might have some logs ourselves to figure out why the data might not be coming through if it's not. So no worries there. This has been really helpful, Ryan, and I really appreciate your time too. So what I'll do is I'll try to get familiar. This is a great use case for us to figure out, you know, how to troubleshoot things ourselves. Maybe the data will start flowing now, but if it doesn't, I'll take a look, do a little bit of a deeper dive. If I am really, really stuck, I'll just shoot you an email. But otherwise, I think we have a lot to play around with. So I think this is a good start.
And I think we've had data going, and I mean, nothing's really changed.
I think it's a small thing. I think it's a small thing. I'm fairly confident it's not something where you're going to need to do any reprogramming. It might just be a good troubleshooting exercise for me, honestly.
Yeah.
If there's a small thing, I'm sure it'll be a small thing that you can just tell me, and I'll be able to do it in the future.
Right on.
All right, cool. Thank you, Ryan. Talk to you later.
Yeah, no problem. Let me know how it goes, how it's going, like in the next week or 2 or 3, and then.
Oh, well.
Yeah.
Yep. I'll definitely let you know.
All right.
We're pretty focused on getting all the data scaled and working probably by the end of this week, so it'll be more of a focus of mine now that all the Pushapp work is done. The server-side work is done. There's a lot of transparency, so it's a lot easier for us to troubleshoot and figure out how to get it to 100%. So yeah.
Yep.
We got a straight shot. Thanks a lot, Ryan.
All right.
Talk
No
to you
problem.
later.
Thanks, Daniel.
Bye.
Yep. Bye.